The chipped ceramic mug warmed my hands, but did little for the chill that had settled deep in my bones. Rain lashed against the windows of my Beechwood drive home, mirroring the storm inside, a tempest that had raged in my soul for months. Wilkinsburg, usually a comforting embrace of familiar streets and quiet neighbors, felt like a hollowed-out stage now, every tree, every cracked sidewalk, a silent witness to my undoing. Her name was Kim J. Merritt, Robert N. O'Leary's daughter. For 15 years, she had been my world, my confidant, my partner, the laughter in our quiet evenings, the warmth beside me in bed. Peter, a dedicated professor of literature in my late 30s, had poured my heart, my intellect, and every spare penny into our shared life. Our house, this very house on Beechwood, was a testament to that devotion. The garden we'd cultivated, the bookshelves brimming with cherished volumes, the worn armchair where I'd graded papers while she read beside me. Then the split. Not a break, but an amputation. It began subtly, a widening chasm of unspoken resentments, a gradual freezing of affection. Then came the words, cold and clinical, from her lips. I want a divorce. And with those words, the carefully constructed edifice of my life began to crumble, brick by agonizing brick. I had been naive, perhaps foolishly in love. I believed in fairness, in compromise, in the lingering respect between two people who once loved each other. Kim, I would soon discover, believed in none of that. Or rather, she believed in her own prosperity and in the ruthlessness her father, Robert N. O'Leary, had evidently instilled in her. The legal proceedings were a blur of legalese and mounting dread. Kim's lawyer, sleek and predatory, systematically dismantled my life. I watched as our shared assets, our savings, the equity in this house, even the antique desk my grandfather had left me, were dissected, apportioned, and, in what felt like a cruel sleight of hand, overwhelmingly awarded to her. She took the car, the one we'd bought together. She took the retirement fund, claiming it was less impacted by my supposedly frivolous academic pursuits. She took the artwork we'd collected, the Persian rug in the living room, even the absurdly expensive espresso machine I'd gifted her for her birthday. The house, my sanctuary, my anchor, became a battleground. For a while, I clung to the hope of retaining it. It was more than just property. It was a repository of memories, of laughter and whispered dreams. But Kim, with her relentless legal team and an almost chilling determination, fought for its sale. She wanted her half, and she wanted it now, regardless of the emotional devastation it would wreak. When the dust settled, I was left with little. A fraction of my savings, barely enough to cover a few months' rent if I sold the house, and the crushing weight of legal fees. My once comfortable existence as a professor, modest but secure, was shattered. Kim, with a final, almost triumphant flourish, secured a substantial alimony payment, citing my higher earning potential, despite the fact that her family wealth far exceeded anything I could ever hope to accumulate. She took everything Peter, my best friend Michael, had said, his voice laced with pity and disbelief, damn near everything. He wasn't exaggerating. She had stripped me bare, financially and emotionally. The divorce wasn't just a split. It was an eviction from my own life, a hostile takeover of my dreams. I remember staring at the empty spaces in the house after she'd moved her things out. The vacant wall where her grandmother's tapestry had hung, the bare shelves where our travel souvenirs once stood. It wasn't just the objects, it was the echoes. The echo of her laughter in the kitchen, the echo of her footsteps on the stairs, the echo of a future that would never be. The silence was deafening. For weeks, I drifted. My lectures, once vibrant and engaging, became
rote Rezitations.
My students, usually a source of joy, saw only a shadow of their former professor. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. Sleep was a luxury I rarely afforded, haunted by nightmares of empty rooms and echoing voices. The shame, the betrayal, the profound sense of loss, it was a suffocating shroud. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, a specter in a house that barely felt like my own anymore. One evening, I found myself staring at the rain-streaked window, much like tonight. But that night, the despair was absolute. I was at the precipice. What was the point? What was left? Then a flicker. A memory. My father, a stoic man who had faced his own share of hardships, had once told me, "Peter, when you're knocked down, you have two choices: stay down or get up. The getting up is what makes you." The getting up. It felt like an impossible feat, like trying to lift a mountain. But the alternative, to simply cease, to fade away, was a betrayal of everything I believed in, everything I had been. I was a professor, a scholar, a man who believed in the power of words, of resilience, of the human spirit. Could I truly let Kim, or anyone, extinguish that flame?
No.
The decision wasn't a sudden burst of defiance. It was a slow, agonizing crawl from the depths of despair. It started with small things. Forcing myself to eat, even when I had no appetite. Taking a shower, even when the thought of facing the mirror was repulsive. Cleaning one small corner of the house, reclaiming a single square foot from the encroaching chaos. My first real act of fighting back was intellectual. I returned to my books, not for lectures, but for personal solace. I immersed myself in the tragedies of Shakespeare, the philosophies of Stoicism, the narratives of survival. I found a strange camaraderie in the suffering of fictional characters, a grim validation in their endurance. It wasn't escape, it was understanding. I began to see my own pain not as a unique curse, but as a universal human experience, albeit one I was now intimately acquainted with. Then came the practical fight. Kim had taken my financial security, but she couldn't take my intellect, my dedication to my profession. I started taking on extra research projects, tutoring evening classes, even volunteering to lead workshops during the summer break. The money was meager compared to what I'd lost, but it was my money, earned through my own effort, not a handout or a settlement. It was a small victory, a tiny act of self-sufficiency that slowly, painstakingly, began to rebuild my shattered worth. The house still loomed. The forced sale was inevitable, a cold, hard fact constantly hanging over my head. But instead of letting it haunt me, I began to view it differently. It was a chapter, a painful one, but not the whole book. I started packing my remaining books, carefully, lovingly. Each volume was a friend, a connection to a world Kim could never touch. I sorted through my personal effects, discarding what held only painful memories, keeping what still resonated with the real me, the Peter before Kim, the Peter after Kim. The process was cathartic. I realized that while she had taken the material possessions, the house, the financial ease, she hadn't taken me. She hadn't taken my mind, my passion for literature, my ability to connect with my students, my inherent kindness. These were things she could never touch, etched into the very core of my being. I secured a new, smaller apartment, a modest space closer to the university. It was a far cry from Beechwood Drive, but it was mine. No ghosts, no echoes of a life that had crumbled. Just bare walls waiting to be filled with new memories, new books, a new beginning. The day the sold sign went up on Beechwood, I felt a strange mix of relief and profound sorrow. It was the final severance, the last thread cut. I drove away, not looking back, a tear tracing a path down my cheek, but also a sense of freedom, raw and terrifying, brewing beneath the surface. At the university, I poured myself into my work. My lectures regained their fervor, perhaps even surpassing their previous intensity. The pain became a wellspring of empathy, allowing me to speak of human suffering, of resilience, of the complexities of the heart with a depth I hadn't possessed before. My students responded. They saw not just a professor, but a man who had walked through fire and emerged, scarred but unbowed. I began to engage with the Wilkinsburg community outside of my academic bubble. I volunteered at the local library, reading to children, finding joy in their innocent curiosity. I joined a hiking group, exploring the natural beauty of Pennsylvania, feeling the earth beneath my feet, the wind in my hair, a tangible connection to the world that had seemed so distant. Life was far from easy. The financial constraints were real, a constant reminder of Kim's victory. Loneliness was a persistent companion, especially on quiet evenings. There were still days, many of them, when the despair threatened to swallow me whole, when the bitterness tasted like ash in my mouth. I would see couples walking hand in hand, hear familiar songs, and the raw wound would ache anew. But I fought back, like a champ. Not with brute force, not with revenge, but with quiet, stubborn resilience. I learned to distinguish between what was truly lost and what could be rebuilt. I learned that while Kim had taken the superficial trappings of my life, she could not take my spirit. She couldn't take my capacity for love, for joy, for purpose. One crisp autumn afternoon, years after the divorce, I walked past Beechwood Drive. The familiar oak trees were ablaze with color, just as they had been every autumn of my life. The house stood, looking subtly different under its new owners, a fresh coat of paint, a new garden gnome by the porch. I felt a pang, a ghost of memory, but it was duller now, less sharp. I paused, breathing in the scent of fallen leaves. I thought of Kim, of Robert N. O'Leary's daughter, and the wreckage she had left behind. There was no anger now, only a profound, weary sadness for the man I had been, for the life that had been irrevocably cleaved in two. I had fought back. I had survived. I had rebuilt a life, one piece at a time, from the ashes. I was stronger, perhaps certainly more resolute. But the victory felt hollow, tinged with the enduring tragedy of what was lost. The champ had won, yes, but the prize was not triumphant joy, but a quiet, hard-won peace, eternally shadowed by the ghost of a heartbreak that would never fully heal. The rain had stopped, but the chill, a subtle reminder of the storm, remained deep in my bones. Thanks for watching.